My name is Karen Hans, and I'm with Fish Biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I'm here to teach you about fish today and talk to you about fish biology. But when I'm teaching you about the fish, I'm teaching you about you too. Because fish have more in common with us than they are different. That's right. Even though they look very different from us, even though they live a very different life, they have more in common with us biologically than they are different. For example, when we breathe air, what's in the air we really want? It's the oxygen. And when fish breathe water, what's in the water they really want? It's the oxygen. Even though we live on the land and they live in the water, we both breathe oxygen. So that's one thing that fish have in common with us. Now, fish survive in their environment using their senses, and so do we. Now, you might not think about that too much. I know I don't. When I got up this morning to come here today and teach you about fish, I thought about a lot of things. Getting up, getting dressed, getting my breakfast and my lunch, driving here, what was I going to talk to you about? One thing I never thought about, getting eaten. Never occurred to me that something might try to eat me. But this fish, it lives its whole life with something trying to eat it. Now, it uses its senses to know what's going on all around it. It has eyes, ears, a nose. Now, we have a predator in our modern day life. I call it the car, because it's really big, it goes really fast, and if it catches you, you lose. So when I'm crossing the street, I'm looking for cars, I'm listening for cars. One thing I'm not doing, I'm not smelling for cars, because humans don't have a very good sense of smell. Fish, on the other hand, they have this extraordinary sense of smell. They can detect odors in the water in parts per billion, the tiniest concentration. Not only can they need to, because it's how they find their way around, it's how they find their food. Most important, it's how they know when there's danger. So let's say you have an otter and it jumps into the lake and it's swimming around looking for a fish to eat. And those tiny concentrations of odor, otter odor, are floating around in the water that only smell like an otter. And the fish will smell that and know there's danger and know what to do even if it's never smelled an otter before. Because this fish has instinct. And that instinct guides it throughout its life. So the problem is, if we humans put a lot of pollution in the water, it interferes with the fish's ability to smell. Like when you walk up to somebody and they're wearing like way too much perfume, and you can't smell anything else anymore, just that person's perfume or their cologne. That's what we do to the fish when we put all that pollution in the water. That's why it's so important to keep the water clean. Now, fish could smell that otter and know there's danger, or they could see the otter with their eye. Now, fish have ears inside of their head, behind their eyes, just like our ears, and they work a lot like our ears do. But when you're a fish and everything wants to eat you, you need more than that. So they have two more ear-like organs called the lateral line. And they run down the side of the fish's body, and it's a sensory organ that detects vibrations in the water. And that's what sound is. It's a vibration. So if that otter is swimming around in the lake looking for the fish could smell the otter with its nose, it could see the otter with its eye, It could hear the otter with its ears, or it could feel the otter with its lateral line. And that's how you survive in the environment when everything wants to eat you. So I'm going to dissect the head of the fish so that you can see some of the organs up here. Now, the other thing that's up in the head of the fish are the gills. And this is how the fish breathes. We have lungs, and the fish have gills. Now, each side of the fish's head has 4 of these gill arches. And that's where the oxygen moves out of the water and into the fish's body, just like how the oxygen moves out of the air and into our lungs and into our body. So that's what the gills look like. Now the gills are very, very delicate tissue. So the fish need this hard plate to protect them. It's also how the fish breathes. It will move its gills, it will bring the water into its mouth, and it will move its gills like this to swirl the water around its gills so it can get that oxygen. Now inside of the fish's mouth, you have a tongue, and you have teeth. And there's lots of teeth. There's teeth on the tongue, there's teeth here on the jaws, and they're very sharp. And there's even teeth, we call them gill rakers, on the gills. Because these fish don't chew their food, they just grab and swallow. And if fish gets something in its mouth, it doesn't want it to get out. Now, I'm going to cut off the top of the fish's head so you can see the brain. This fish is a steelhead, and it's very special. It's a type of trout that goes to the ocean, and that's why it's so much bigger than trout that don't go to the ocean. But it's called steelhead for a reason. It's got a very hard head. Now I'm doing this so that I can show you the fish's brain. Now don't try this at home. If you notice, I'm wearing a Kevlar glove. This protects my hand from the knife blade. And here is the fish's brain. Now I'm going to carefully pull it out. So that you can see there's lobes to the brain. So let's talk about the brain a little bit, because I oftentimes hear from students when I do a fish dissection about how small the fish's brain is, and gee, they must be stupid. Well, nothing could be further than the truth. Fish are very smart. They're very good at being fish. They just don't need that big brain because they have instinct. Now, we have a big brain partly because we have to learn things, and then we have to store those memories. So, for example, the first time this fish smelled an otter, it knew there was danger, and it knew what to do. Swim away as fast as it can and hide under something. Hide under a tree or a rock. You and I had to learn how to cross the street safely. Someone had to teach us that. And then we had to store that memory in our brain. And now whenever we come up to a street, you probably don't even think much about it, but your brain does. You walk up to that intersection and your brain is like, oh, danger, danger. What do I do? What do I do? Oh yeah, that's right. I step up to the curb. I wait for the green light to turn red. I wait for that orange hand to become a walking man. And then I stay between the white lines and I look both ways. You had to learn that. And that's why we need that bigger brain. What the fish's brain does do for it is the other thing that our brain does for us, which controls our central nervous system. And those are the electrical like wires that run through your whole body and send electrical charges to your muscles to make them contract. My hand is moving right now because my brain is sending an electrical signal through my nerves to shock my muscles to tell them to move. So that's what the fish's brain does for it. It just doesn't need to have that big brain to store the memories because it has instinct. Now this is the fish's eye. And it sees very much like we do. It has an optical nerve that takes the signal to the brain. It has cells inside of the eye called rods and cones. And that is what the eye looks like outside of the fish. And inside of the eye is the lens. Now, our lens looks like a contact lens, like you put in your eye so you can see better. But the fish has a round lens, kind of like a crystal ball. So that's what's going on up in the head of the fish. Let's talk about what's going on with the rest of this fish. Now, another thing that the fish has in common with us that might surprise you is slime. That's right. The slime, or the mucus, on the outside of this fish. Now, this mucus is very important to the fish. It's part of their immune system. And the immune system is what keeps the fish healthy. And we have an immune system too. So the water all around the fish has viruses and bacteria that want to attack the fish and make it sick. So the fish wants to protect itself from all that, so it has this thick mucus coating on the outside of the fish. And that forms a barrier. Well, there's viruses and bacteria and mold and pollen and dirt in the air all around us. And our lungs want to protect us from that. And our body's immune system wants to protect us from that. So our lungs and our throat and our nose are covered in a thick mucus. And when you get infected with a virus that causes the common cold, or you get allergies, or for me, mildew and mold, as soon as I smell that mildew or mold, my body goes on the defensive. And all this thick mucus starts coming out of my nose, and I have to blow my nose, and all this stuff comes out, this gooey yellow stuff that we like to call snot. Well, that snot that comes out of your nose is biologically the same thing that's produced for the same reason as the mucus on the side of the fish. I mean, look at it. It even looks like snot. So that's another thing that we have in common with the fish, is snot. So let's talk about what's inside this fish, because what's inside of this fish is pretty much the same as what's inside of you. We have pretty much the same internal organs, with the exception of the swim bladder. Now, fish have this organ inside of them. It's kind of like a balloon, and it helps the fish float. It's like always having a life jacket on, except the fish can bring air in and out of that air bladder, depending on whether they want to be down at the bottom of the river or up at the top. So now, when we breathe in, and let's say I take a big breath, and there's this oxygen sitting right up here next to my lung, and my little toe is down here, and it's going, hello, down here, oxygen. How does the oxygen get from here to my little toe? Well, it's carried by the red blood cell. Now, red blood cells love oxygen, and they come circulating past the lung and see the oxygen, and they go, oh, oxygen, and they grab a hold of it, and they carry it down, 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 down your leg, all the way down to your little toe. And then your little toe says, hey, thank you for the oxygen. Can I have it now? And the red cell says, wait a minute, I love my oxygen. I don't know if I want to give it to you. And the the little toe says, I tell you what, I'll give you something. If you give me that oxygen, I'll give you carbon dioxide. And so the red cell says, okay. So the red cell gives the oxygen to the little toe and takes the carbon dioxide and carries it back, and then you breathe out the carbon dioxide. That's right, you breathe in oxygen, and when you exhale the carbon dioxide. Well, the fish do the same thing. They breathe in the oxygen from the water. The red blood cell carries it down to the tail, lets it go, grabs a carbon dioxide, and brings it back to the lungs. Well, how does that oxygen and blood get moved around the body? The heart. Just like us. We have a heart and they have a heart. So let's cut this fish open and let's start to see what's inside. As you can see, there's a lot of eggs coming out of this fish, which means, of course, that she is a female. Now, this steelhead is going to have between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs in her. And that's a big reason why steelhead go to the ocean, is because there's a lot more food out there. That way they can get a lot bigger and they can come back to lay their eggs in the freshwater river, and they can have a lot more eggs in them and produce a lot more steelhead. Now, don't worry, these were not going to be calm little fish because they're not fertilized. They're kind of like the chicken eggs you get at Safeway. So here is the fish's heart. And it works pretty much like our heart does. It pumps the blood from the body up to the gills and back around again. So let's just take a quick look inside here at what all we have. And then we'll talk about each individual organ. Sometimes when you open up the fish, the air bladder, the swim bladder, will still have air in it. And it looks really cool. It's like a big balloon inside the fish. So someday if you ever clean a fish and you see that big air bladder, you'll know what it is. So this is the liver. And the liver is a very important organ. We have a liver too. And the liver does a lot of things for us and for the fish. It stores vitamins. It keeps our blood healthy. But most important, it detoxifies poison. Now, what makes a poison is the way the molecule is put together with all the different carbon and hydrogen and phosphorus and nitrogen and all those basic elements. And the way that molecule is put together is what makes it toxic or poisonous to us. And so if you eat or drink or breathe or it absorbs through your skin or somehow you ingest this poison, it starts circulating around your body. And at some point your body goes, oh, I've been poisoned, send it to the liver. Well, that blood circulates around through the liver and the liver takes out that poisonous molecule and tries to smash it into little pieces to detoxify it. So that's a really, really important function of the liver. Now, it does the same thing in a fish. It detoxifies poison, and it produces enzymes that digest fats, and it stores vitamins, and it keeps the blood healthy. Now this is the spleen. And the spleen also keeps our blood healthy and the fish's blood healthy, because that red blood cell that's circulating around carrying the oxygen and that white blood cell that's part of your immune system, they only live about 2 or 3 months. And so as the blood circulates through the spleen kind of evaluates those blood cells to see if they're still healthy and functioning. And if they're not, they pull that cell out and they send it to be recycled into a new blood cell. So this is the stomach. And this organ right here that kind of looks like little worms, it's called the pyloric ceca. Now, the first time I looked inside a fish, I thought it was worms. I thought, oh no, that fish has parasites. But no, this is actually part of the fish's digestive system. It's kind of like our pancreas. Now, you may notice that, gee, the stomach is awfully small for such a big fish. Well, when this steelhead came back from the ocean to spawn, it stopped eating. And for many months, it didn't eat anything. And its stomach shrunk down very, very small so that it could fill up its whole abdominal cavity with all of these eggs. Now, the other organ I want to talk about is what I think is the most underrated organ in our body and in the fish's body. And it's called the kidney. Now, the fish has one kidney. We have two. But the function of the kidney is the same. Now, the kidney has a very important role of removing toxins from our body and keeping our body in balance in terms of our salt in our body. So if you eat too much salt, you may have heard that, oh, don't eat too much salt, right? So it's the kidney's responsibility to make sure that our salts in our body stay in balance, but its most important function is to regulate the amount of water in our body. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but we humans and this fish exist in a very narrow window. Not enough water, we die. Too much water, we die. Really. Now, you might not really think about that too much because it's so rare for someone to get sick and die from too much water, and that's because we have kidneys. Now, if we don't have enough to drink and our kidney senses that we're dehydrated, it sends a signal to our brain to make us feel thirsty. And if we drink too much water, then that water is pulled out of our blood by the kidney to make urine. Now, when the kidney does this, it's defending your life. And so it takes that very, very seriously. So let's say you go to the movies and you think, oh, I'm gonna get me one of those really big sodas. So you get one of those great big giant sodas, you know, and you carry it to your seat, and you sit down and you start drinking it. And then you have to sit through all those movie previews, and finally the movie starts, and you're like, oh, all right, my friend told me about this movie, it's gonna be so good. And then about 20 minutes later, you get down to the bottom of that big giant soda. And then about another half hour goes by, and your kidney goes, really? 44 ounces of Coke? I have got way too much water in me. Starts making urine. Right then the movie gets really exciting, right? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh no, I have to pee. I don't want to get up right now. This is a really good part of the movie. I'll hold it. And your kidney says, no, you're not. And you think, oh, no, I can hold it. I don't want to get up now. This is a really good part of the movie. I don't want to. And your kidney says, no, you're not. You know who's going to win? Your kidney. Every time. Because it is defending your life. So remember that. Kidney, very, very important. And of course, the fish doesn't have to worry about that, because the fish doesn't have to worry about a bathroom. A fish just pees when it's going to pee. So, now, pretty much finished up the dissection of the fish. Although I have a lot of students ask me if they can see what's underneath this tissue here. So this is the muscle. This is what we eat. And that's what the fish's muscles look like. Now, this is the vertebrae. This is the spine of the fish, because fish are vertebrates, just like we are. So what I really want you to get out of this lesson today is how much the fish are like us, and how amazing they are, and how it's really, really important for us to take care of the water that they live in, because everything we do eventually ends up in the water. And so think about that when you are going about your life. How much water are you using? Can you turn the faucet off while you're brushing your teeth? Because fish need that water. And to keep the water clean so the fish can know when there's danger. And just remember, fish are amazing.